After my husband's funeral, my only son drove me to a abandoned road and said, "This is where you get off." I started walking. Not because I had somewhere to go, but because standing still felt like giving up. Each step hurt. These shoes weren't made for hiking, but pain meant I was still alive. Still moving. Still worth something, even if my own son couldn't see it. Have you ever felt completely alone in the world? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. The headlights cut through Ohio darkness as my son pulled over on that abandoned road and said 5 words that shattered my world. This is where you get off. Have you ever been abandoned by someone you die for? Do you know what it feels like when family becomes strangers? Tonight, I'll show you how betrayal cuts deeper than death. But what my son didn't know would change everything. Earlier that day, in the funeral home, I overheard whispers that revealed a truth about my son's inheritance and about the woman who'd been circling him like a vulture. That road wasn't just where he left me, it was where everything changed. And what came next is something you may not believe unless you've ever been betrayed by the one you'd give your life for. Tell me in the comments, have you ever trusted someone so deeply only for them to break you? Stay with me, this journey will challenge everything you believe about family loyalty. The engine idled rough on that country road, same way Daniel's voice shook when he spoke those words. I'd been riding shotgun for 37 years of marriage, watching Harold navigate these same Ohio backroads after long factory shifts. Now here I sat, 3 hours after burying my husband, watching my only child's hands tremble on the steering wheel like he was the one being left behind. "Mom, I can't." His voice cracked. The dashboard clock read 9:47 p.m. November in Ohio meant frost warnings and empty highways. I just can't do this anymore. The funeral had been small. Harold never wanted much fuss. But I remember thinking how quiet Daniel seemed, how his eyes kept darting to that woman in the black coat who lingered near the back pews. Victoria something. I'd never seen her before, but she watched our family like she was studying us for a test. "Do what, honey?" I asked, though something cold was already creeping up my spine. "Take care of your mother." Daniel's knuckles went white against the wheel. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The debts. The people calling. Dad's medical bills cleaned us out, and now there's lawyers and..." He stopped himself, but I heard what he didn't say. "There's money involved, and I'm in the way." The heater wheezed warm air that couldn't touch the chill spreading through my chest. Harold used to say Daniel was our miracle baby, born when doctors said we couldn't have children. 28 years raising that boy, working double shifts so he could have things we never did. College. Opportunities. A chance to be better than his factory worker parents. "Get out," he said, not looking at me. "Daniel, what are you saying?" "Get out." His voice exploded in the small space, making me flinch. This wasn't my son anymore. This was a stranger wearing Daniel's face, speaking with Daniel's voice, but empty where his heart should be. I opened the car door because what choice did I have? The November air bit through my funeral dress like teeth. Harold bought me this dress for our anniversary 2 years ago. Said I looked beautiful in navy blue. Now it felt like a costume for my own burial. "Daniel, please." My voice came out smaller than I intended. "I'm your mother." He wouldn't meet my eyes in the rearview mirror. "Take care of yourself, Mom." The car pulled away, leaving me in red taillights and darkness. Gravel crunched under my dress shoes. The good ones I saved for church and special occasions. The road stretched empty in both directions, cornfields on either side rustling with wind that sounded like whispers. But standing there, abandoned like roadkill, something Harold used to say came back to me. "Helen, you're stronger than you know. Don't let anybody, not even family, make you forget that." I started walking. Not because I had somewhere to go, but because standing still felt like giving up. Each step hurt. These shoes weren't made for hiking, but pain meant I was still alive. Still moving. Still worth something, even if my own son couldn't see it. The cold made my breath visible in small puffs. Like smoke signals. Like prayers. Like proof that I was still here, still breathing, still fighting. Harold's wedding ring pressed against my chest where I wore it on a chain. The metal was warm from my skin, and I held onto it like an anchor. That's when I heard them. Footsteps behind me on the gravel, matching my pace but heavier. My heart hammered against Harold's ring. Had Daniel changed his mind? Had he come back? But when I turned around, the headlights belonged to a pickup truck I'd never seen before. The footsteps belonged to a man stepping out of the driver's side, tall and broad-shouldered against the truck's headlight glare. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice carrying a southern accent that didn't belong on these Ohio roads. "You look like you could use some help. Have you ever felt completely alone in the world? Share your story below. I promise you're not as powerless as they want you to believe." Because what happened next proved that sometimes, when family fails you, strangers become the family you choose. Let me take you back to earlier that day, before the road, before the abandonment, to Harold's funeral where everything started falling apart. The funeral home smelled like lilies and furniture polish, trying to cover up the scent of death with something pretty. I sat in the front row, staring at my husband's casket, wondering how 37 years could fit into a wooden box. Daniel sat beside me, but he felt miles away. His phone buzzed every few minutes. Even at his father's funeral, he couldn't put the damn thing down. Each buzz made my jaw clench tighter until I thought my teeth might crack. "Who keeps texting you?" I whispered. "Work stuff, Mom. Nothing important." But I saw the name on his screen when he thought I wasn't looking. Victoria. The same woman who'd been watching us from the back of the church like a hawk circling prey. After the service, people milled around offering condolences that sounded like scripts. "He was a good man. He's in a better place. Let us know if you need anything." Empty words from people who'd disappear the moment real help was needed. That's when I excused myself to use the restroom and overheard the conversation that changed everything. The old man had more money than anyone knew, a man's voice said from around the corner. "Life insurance, pension, that house is worth twice what they think. Kid sitting on a gold mine if he plays this right." "What about the mother?" A woman's voice. Smooth. Calculating. "She won't be a problem much longer. Daniel's already signed the papers we drew up. Power of attorney, estate management. Once she's out of the picture, it's clean sailing." My hand froze on the bathroom door handle. They were talking about Harold's money. About me being out of the picture. About Daniel signing papers. "How long before she's gone?" the woman asked. "Week, maybe 2. Kid's got more backbone than we thought. Amazing what people will do when they owe the right people money." I pressed my ear closer to the wall, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they'd hear it. "Victoria, you're a genius," the man continued. "Finding marks at funerals, when they're too grief-struck to think straight. These small-town families never see it coming." Victoria. The name from Daniel's phone. The woman in black who'd been studying us like a science experiment. The gambling debts made Daniel desperate enough. Victoria's voice carried satisfaction like honey over poison. "Now we just have to make sure Mama doesn't interfere with the transfer of assets." My legs went weak. Daniel had gambling debts? Since when? Harold never mentioned, but then again, Harold had been protecting me from a lot of things near the end. Always saying not to worry about money, that he had everything handled. When I finally emerged from that bathroom, I looked at my son differently. Really looked at him. His expensive shoes. When did he start wearing shoes that cost more than our monthly grocery bill? The nervous way he kept checking his phone. How he'd barely cried at his father's funeral, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. During the graveside service, I watched Daniel instead of the casket. Watched him scan the crowd. Watched him nod slightly at Victoria, who stood far enough away to seem like a random mourner but close enough to make eye contact. The preacher's words about eternal rest and peaceful sleep felt like mockery. Nothing about this was peaceful. Harold was dead, Daniel was involved with criminals, and I was apparently scheduled to be out of the picture within 2 weeks. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They underestimated a woman who'd survived Mississippi poverty, Ohio factory layoffs, and 37 years of marriage to a man who taught me that quiet doesn't mean weak. After we threw dirt on Harold's casket, Daniel walked me to his car with his hand on my elbow like I was fragile china. Like I might break if he wasn't careful. Little did he know, I was already broken. But broken things can have sharp edges. "Mom, we need to talk about Dad's arrangements," he said as we drove away from the cemetery. "What arrangements?" "Legal stuff. Paperwork. You don't need to worry about the details." The way he said details made my skin crawl. Like I was too stupid or too old to understand my own husband's affairs. Like I hadn't been balancing our checkbook and paying bills since before Daniel could tie his shoes. "I want to see the paperwork," I said. "Mom, it's complicated. Let me handle it." That's when I knew for certain. My son, the boy I'd rocked through nightmares and nursed through fevers, was planning to steal his dead father's legacy and throw his mother away like garbage. But he'd picked the wrong woman to underestimate. What would you do if you discovered your child was planning to betray you at your most vulnerable moment? Comment below. Because this story is just getting started, and you won't believe how far a mother will go to protect what's rightfully hers. The footsteps behind me on that dark road belonged to trouble. I could feel it in my bones the way Harold used to predict storms. But trouble comes in different shapes, and sometimes it looks like salvation wearing work boots and a flannel shirt. "Ma'am, I'm not trying to scare you," the man called out, staying a respectful distance behind me. "But walking these roads at night isn't safe for anyone, especially not alone." I turned around, ready to tell him I'd rather take my chances with wild animals than trust another man tonight. But when his truck's headlights hit his face, something about his expression stopped me cold. Kind eyes. Harold had kind eyes. "Name's Marcus," he said, hands visible at his sides like he understood I was scared. "I saw what happened back there. Your son leaving you like that. You were watching us?" I was following him. Marcus stepped closer, and I could see he was maybe 10 years younger than me, with grease under his fingernails and the kind of honest face you don't see much anymore. "I've been keeping an eye on your family since Harold passed." The way he said my husband's name made me stop walking entirely. "How do you know Harold?" Marcus glanced back down the road where Daniel's taillights had disappeared. "Your husband hired me to watch out for you. Said he was worried about Daniel getting mixed up with the wrong people." "Harold never mentioned you." "Harold never mentioned a lot of things he was worried about. He didn't want to scare you." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a text message dated 3 days before Harold died. "Take care of Helen if something happens to me. She doesn't know how dangerous this has gotten." My hands shook as I read the message. Harold's number. Harold's way of writing. Dangerous how? "Your son owes money to people who don't take no for an answer. Your husband found out and started asking questions. Wrong questions to the wrong people." The November wind cut through my funeral dress, but the chill I felt had nothing to do with weather. "Are you saying Harold's heart attack wasn't?" "I'm saying your husband was healthier than most men half his age until 3 days before he died." Marcus put his phone away. "I'm saying that woman Victoria your son's been talking to specializes in finding families like yours. Grieving families with assets and heirs desperate enough to sign papers they don't understand." My legs felt like water. I reached for Marcus's truck to steady myself, and his hand caught my elbow, gentle but firm. His touch sent electricity through me that I hadn't felt since Harold was alive. It scared me how much I needed that contact, that proof someone still saw me as worth protecting. "Get in the truck," Marcus said. "We need to talk somewhere warm." "I don't know you." "No, you don't. But I knew your husband, and Harold was the best man I ever met. He saved my life once, and I promised him I'd return the favor by watching over you." Marcus opened the passenger door. "Right now, I'm the only person in Ohio who gives a damn whether you live or die. The truck cab smelled like coffee and motor oil. Real smells. Honest smells. Not like the funeral home's artificial flowers or Daniel's expensive cologne that probably cost more than Harold's last paycheck. Marcus started the engine and cranked the heat. Where do you want to go? I don't have anywhere. The words came out smaller than I intended. Daniel was we were supposed to figure things out together. Daniel's been figuring things out for weeks. Just not with you in mind. I stared out at the cornfields rushing past in darkness. How long have you known? About Daniel's gambling? 2 months. About Victoria? 6 weeks. About Harold getting suspicious enough to hire me to investigate? Marcus glanced over at me. The day before he died. The truck hit a pothole, and I grabbed the door handle. Marcus's hand briefly covered mine on the handle, steadying me, protecting me. His skin was warm and calloused from real work, not like Daniel's soft hands that had never built anything except debts. What kind of investigation? The kind that gets people killed when they get too close to the truth. Marcus pulled into a truck stop diner, the kind Harold and I used to visit on Sunday drives when we were young and everything seemed possible. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, casting pink light across the parking lot. Harold left something for you, Marcus said, turning off the engine. Something he hid where Daniel and Victoria would never think to look. But first, you need to know exactly what you're up against. Inside my purse, Harold's funeral program was folded around a tissue I'd used to wipe away tears. Real tears for a real man who'd apparently died protecting secrets I never knew he was keeping. How do I know you're telling the truth? I asked. Marcus reached into his wallet and pulled out a photograph. Harold and a younger man, Marcus, standing in front of a garage, both smiling, both covered in grease, both looking like they'd just solved the world's problems with their bare hands. Because Harold talked about you every day for 15 years. Because he showed me pictures of Daniel's graduation, your anniversary dinners, every Christmas morning. Because when he hired me, he said the exact words you just spoke. How do I know you're telling the truth? The photograph proved Marcus had known Harold, but it didn't prove everything else. Still, sitting in that truck, feeling more protected than I had since Harold's diagnosis, I made a choice that would define the rest of my life. Show me what Harold left. Marcus smiled, the first real smile I'd seen all day. Now you sound like the woman Harold described. The one who refused to let Mississippi poverty break her spirit. Have you ever had to choose between the devil you know and the stranger who might save you? Comment below and tell me, because what Marcus showed me next would prove that Harold's death was just the beginning of this nightmare. Like this video if you think Helen should trust Marcus, and subscribe because this story is about to take turns you never saw coming. The diner's fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and real. Marcus ordered black coffee. I ordered tea I wouldn't drink. My stomach couldn't handle anything except the truth, and Marcus was about to serve me a full helping. Let me tell you what I saw at that funeral home, Marcus said, settling into the cracked vinyl booth. Let me tell you about the conversations happening while you grieved your husband. I gripped my teacup like a lifeline. I heard some of it. In the bathroom. You heard Victoria talking to her partner, Ray. But you didn't hear what happened before the service started. Marcus pulled out a small recording device, the kind Harold used to use for work meetings when he thought someone might lie about what was discussed. I planted this under the guest book table. Harold taught me to document everything when dealing with people who make their living off other people's misery. He pressed play, and Victoria's voice filled the space between us, cold and businesslike. The target profile is perfect. Recent widow, isolated, financially naive. The son has $43,000 in gambling debts to people who break kneecaps for late payments. Another voice, male, gravelly, responded. How'd you flip the kid so fast? Easy. Told him his father's assets could cover his debts with plenty left over, but only if Mama doesn't interfere with the estate transfer. Made him believe she's the obstacle between him and financial freedom. My tea went cold in my hands. Daniel owed $43,000? To people who hurt you when you couldn't pay? Victoria's voice continued. The beautiful part is, she trusts him completely. 30 years of helicopter parenting made her think her precious boy could never hurt her. She'll sign whatever he puts in front of her. What about the husband's death? Clean. Clean enough. Digitalis overdose looks like heart failure in men his age, especially with his medical history. Small dose in his evening medication, and natural causes becomes the official story. The recording device slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the table. Marcus caught it before it hit the floor. Harold was murdered? My voice came out as a whisper. Poisoned. Slowly, over several days, to make it look natural. The diner spun around me. The cheerful country music from the jukebox turned into noise. The smell of bacon grease made my stomach lurch. Why didn't you stop it? Marcus's face darkened. Because Harold didn't tell me what he suspected until it was too late. He called me the night before he died, said Daniel was acting strange, asking questions about life insurance policies and inheritance law. Said there was a woman filling Daniel's head with ideas about quick money. The night before? I couldn't breathe properly. Harold knew he was going to die. Harold knew he was in danger. He hid evidence, set up safeguards, left you instructions. Marcus leaned forward. But he never thought Daniel would abandon you on a country road like unwanted baggage. The recording device sat between us like a loaded gun. Evidence of murder. Evidence of betrayal. Evidence that my son had helped kill his father for money. There's more, Marcus said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Victoria's done this before. 12 families across 3 states. Always the same pattern: identify grieving families with assets, corrupt the heir with debt or blackmail, eliminate the surviving spouse. He spread out photographs across the table. Newspaper clippings. Death certificates. All natural causes. All heart attacks or strokes. All leaving behind confused families and missing money. Eliminate how? Sometimes it's accidents. Sometimes it's suicide from grief. Sometimes they just disappear entirely. Marcus gathered the photos. You were scheduled for option 3. The coffee shop's warmth felt suffocating. I needed air, but I needed answers more. How do you know all this? Because Harold hired me to protect you 6 weeks ago. Because I'm a private investigator who specializes in estate fraud. And because... Marcus hesitated, like he was deciding whether to trust me with something important. Because my mother was Victoria's first victim, 15 years ago in Tennessee. The personal connection hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a job for Marcus. This was revenge. Your mother. Victoria convinced my stepfather that my mother was preventing him from accessing her late husband's pension. Staged a home invasion that went wrong. Mother died, stepfather inherited everything, Victoria got her cut. Marcus's voice stayed steady, but his hands clenched into fists. Took me 10 years to track down the pattern and connect Victoria to that crime. And Harold hired you because he was smart enough to research Daniel's new girlfriend before trusting her with family information. Harold found my website, read about my mother's case, and realized he was looking at the same woman. The diner's door chimed as late-night truckers came and went, living their simple lives while mine exploded into pieces I couldn't put back together. My husband was murdered. My son was a conspirator. And the only person trying to help me was a stranger whose mother had died the same way I was supposed to. What evidence did Harold leave? Marcus smiled grimly. Enough to put Victoria away forever. Enough to save Daniel if he's willing to testify against her. But first, we have to get to it before Victoria realizes Harold outsmarted her. Where is it? Safety deposit box in Georgia. Harold's brother Billy has the key. My hand started shaking again. Georgia meant leaving Ohio. Leaving everything familiar. Leaving the life Harold and I built together. But staying meant dying. There's something else, Marcus said, his voice gentler now. Harold left you a message. A video message explaining everything. Have you ever discovered that someone you loved died protecting you from truths that would destroy you? Share in the comments if you've ever had your whole world turned upside down in a single day. Hit that like button if you think Helen should trust Marcus with her life, and subscribe because this investigation is about to take us into territory where family loyalty gets tested by blood and bullets. Marcus drove us to a 24-hour motel outside Akron where the night clerk didn't ask questions and the rooms rented by the hour or the week. Not the kind of place Harold would ever take me, but then again, Harold never had to run for his life with a stranger who claimed to be protecting me from my own son. 2 rooms, Marcus told the clerk, sliding cash across the counter. Adjoining, if you have them. The gesture meant something. He wasn't trying to take advantage. He was trying to keep me safe while respecting boundaries that a woman my age had every right to maintain. Still, when his hand brushed mine taking the room keys, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Harold's illness started, the warmth of being wanted, not just needed. Room 23 smelled like disinfectant and disappointment, but it had a lock on the door and clean sheets on the bed. Marcus knocked on the adjoining door 3 times, our agreed signal, before entering with a laptop computer and a manila envelope thick enough to choke on. Harold's video message first, he said, setting up the laptop on the small table by the window. He recorded this 2 days before he died. Asked me to show it to you only if something happened to him. The laptop screen flickered to life, and there was Harold sitting in our garage, looking tired but determined. My heart clenched seeing his face again, hearing his voice filling the space between Marcus and me. Helen, honey, if you're watching this, then I'm gone and you're in danger. Harold's recorded voice carried the weight of fear I'd never heard from him in life. I found out about Daniel's gambling debts 6 weeks ago. $43,000 to people who hurt families when they don't get paid. The recording showed Harold holding up bank statements, credit card bills, documents I'd never seen. Our boy got in deep, and now there's a woman named Victoria helping him see our assets as the solution to his problems. My hands covered my mouth as Harold continued. I hired Marcus to investigate, and what we found. Harold paused, looking directly into the camera like he could see me across time and death. Victoria's killed before, Helen. And Daniel doesn't know he's being used. Marcus paused the video. There's more, but you need to understand what we discovered about Victoria's operation before you hear Harold's final instructions. He opened the manila envelope and spread out documents across the motel bed. Police reports from 3 states. Death certificates. Financial records showing the same pattern over and over. Victoria Castellanos, age 42, originally from Miami. She targets recently widowed women in small towns, identifies their heirs, exploits the heirs' financial desperation, then eliminates the widows once asset transfers are complete. I studied the photographs of other victims. Women who looked like me. Ordinary women who'd worked hard, loved their families, and died because someone saw their modest savings as worth killing for. How does she choose her targets? Obituaries. She reads obituaries in small-town newspapers, looking for specific markers. Recent deaths, surviving spouses, mentions of long careers or home ownership. Marcus pointed to a highlighted newspaper clipping. Your husband's obituary mentioned his 37 years at the factory and your paid-off house. To Victoria, that signals assets worth stealing. The motel room felt smaller with each revelation. I was prey. Had been prey since the moment Harold's death notice ran in the Cleveland Plain Dealer. What about Daniel? How much does he know? That's complicated. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that I could smell his cologne, clean and masculine, nothing like Harold's aftershave but somehow comforting. Victoria convinced him that quick access to inheritance money would solve his gambling problems. Made him believe you'd never approve of using Harold's assets to pay debts. She's right. I wouldn't. But she didn't tell him about the murder. Didn't tell him that once you're gone, his usefulness ends too. Victoria doesn't leave loose ends, Helen. Daniel thinks he's getting rescued. Really, he's being set up as the grieving son who inherits everything just before dying in a tragic accident. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Victoria planned to kill us both, mother and son, and walk away with Harold's life's work. Why haven't you gone to the police? Marcus laughed bitterly. With what evidence? A recording of conversations that could be explained away as business talk. Suspicions about a heart attack that was ruled natural causes? Victoria's too smart to leave obvious tracks. Then what do? We get Harold's evidence from Georgia. We document Victoria's next moves. We build a case that even corrupt cops can't ignore. Marcus stood and moved to the window, checking the parking lot like he expected company. But first, we have to survive long enough to get there. The way he said, "we," made something flutter in my chest. Not just gratitude, something deeper. Something that felt almost like attraction, which seemed wrong and right at the same time. I was a 62-year-old widow whose husband had been buried that morning. I shouldn't be noticing how Marcus's jeans fit or how his voice got softer when he talked about protecting me. But I was noticing. And it felt like waking up after a long, cold sleep. "There's something else," Marcus said, turning back from the window. "Something Harold discovered about your family that goes back further than Daniel's gambling debts." He pulled out one more document, older, yellowed at the edges. A birth certificate from Mississippi, dated 1962. Harold wasn't just worried about you, Helen. He was worried about what you'd discover about him. I took the birth certificate with trembling hands. The mother's name was listed as Margaret Sullivan. The father's name was blank. But the child's name made my world tilt sideways. Marcus Eugene Sullivan. Harold was your father? I whispered. Marcus nodded slowly. Which makes Daniel my half-brother. Which makes this whole thing a family matter that's about to get very complicated. The motel room went completely silent except for the heating unit rattling against the wall. I was holding hands with my husband's son. Feeling attraction for my stepson. Depending on family I never knew existed while my known family tried to kill me. What would you do if you discovered your protector was family you never knew you had? Share your thoughts below because this story is about to explore territory where blood ties and survival instincts collide in ways you never expected. Hit that subscribe button, you'll need to see how Helen handles this shocking family revelation, and trust me, it gets much more complicated from here. The diner felt like a place outside of time, where truckers and insomniacs gathered under buzzing lights that made everyone look like they were running from something. At 3 a.m, we fit right in. Marcus, my stepson, though the word felt foreign and impossible, ordered eggs and bacon like we were discussing the weather instead of family secrets that could get us killed. I ordered toast I wouldn't eat and coffee that tasted like burnt hope. How long did you know? I asked when the waitress left us alone in the corner booth. About being Harold's son? My whole life. About you being my stepmother? Only when Harold hired me 8 weeks ago. Marcus stirred sugar into his coffee with deliberate calm. My mother never hid the truth about my father. Said he was a good man who got married to someone else before he knew she was pregnant. The mathematics of it made my head spin. Harold would have been 22 when Marcus was born. We didn't meet until Harold was 25, didn't marry until he was 28. No betrayal there, just life happening in complicated ways that small-town gossip never captures correctly. Why didn't Harold tell me about you? Shame, maybe. Fear you'd think less of him for leaving a woman pregnant, even though he never knew. Marcus met my eyes across the table. Or maybe he was protecting you from exactly this situation, knowing that if his past came calling, you'd be safer not being connected to it. The waitress brought our food, and Marcus ate like a man who understood that fuel was necessary for survival. I watched him move, looking for Harold in his gestures, his expressions. The way he held his fork. The way he listened with his whole attention when I spoke. You have his hands, I said suddenly. Marcus paused mid-bite. People used to say that. Before I knew who my father was, people would tell my mother I had my daddy's hands. Working hands. Hands that fixed things instead of breaking them. Hands that felt safe when they touched mine, even though everything about this situation should feel dangerous and wrong. Tell me about Daniel's gambling, I said, needing to focus on problems I could solve instead of feelings I couldn't explain. Marcus pulled out a folder of papers from his jacket. Bank statements, credit card records, receipts from casinos and online betting sites. Started small 3 years ago. Fantasy football, March Madness brackets. But addiction grows, and Daniel got in deeper than he could handle. The numbers made me dizzy. 3,000 here, 8,000 there, mounting into debts that would take years of Harold's factory wages to repay. How did Victoria find him? She works with the loan sharks. When Marks can't pay, she approaches them with solutions that seem like salvation. Tells them she can help them access family money quickly, quietly, legally. Legally? Power of attorney documents, estate management contracts, trust amendments. All legal paperwork that gives her control over family assets once certain family members are out of the picture. Marcus showed me photocopies of documents with Daniel's signature. My name appeared throughout, but always as someone whose rights were being transferred to Daniel, then to Victoria's management company. He signed papers giving away my house? Your house, Harold's pension, life insurance, everything. Victoria told him it was temporary, just until his debts were settled. Daniel believed her because he wanted to believe her. The betrayal felt fresh again, sharp as the moment Daniel told me to get out of his car. But underneath the hurt, anger was growing. Good, clean anger that burned away the shock and left me thinking clearly for the first time since Harold's funeral. What's her timeline? Originally? Natural death from grief within 2 weeks. When that didn't work fast enough, mysterious disappearance within the month. Marcus reached across the table and covered my hand with his. But Harold's evidence changes everything. We can stop her, Helen. We can save Daniel and make Victoria pay for what she's done. His hand on mine sent warmth up my arm and into places I'd forgotten could feel warm. This was wrong on about 17 different levels. He was Harold's son, I was grieving, we'd known each other for 4 hours. But wrong had been keeping me cold and alone while right was about to get me killed. What kind of evidence did Harold leave? Financial records proving Victoria's pattern across multiple states. Recordings of her conversations with loan sharks. Documentation of her previous victims. Marcus's thumb traced across my knuckles, and I didn't pull away. And video evidence of her poisoning Harold's medication. Harold recorded his own murder? Harold set up a hidden camera in your medicine cabinet. Caught Victoria entering your house while you were at the grocery store. Caught her adding drops to Harold's heart medication. Marcus's voice got harder. We have her on video committing murder. The diner seemed to fade around us until there was just Marcus's voice, Marcus's hand on mine, and the impossible reality that Harold had died knowing exactly who killed him and why. Why didn't he confront her? Because confronting her would have put you in immediate danger. Harold chose to gather evidence and wait for the right moment to expose her. He died before that moment came. Marcus lifted my hand and pressed it against his chest, where I could feel his heart beating strong and steady. But you're still alive, Helen. And that means Harold's plan can still work. The contact made my breath catch. 62 years old, widowed this morning, and I was responding to a man's touch like a woman who'd been starved for affection. Which, I realized, I had been. Harold's illness had stolen our intimacy months before it stole his life. Where in Georgia? I asked, my voice rougher than intended. Small town called Valdosta. Billy owns a garage there, lives above it. Harold sent him the evidence weeks ago with instructions to give it to you if anything happened. The waitress refilled our coffee cups, and I noticed how she smiled at Marcus, the automatic response women have to men who radiate protection and competence. I also noticed how Marcus barely acknowledged her, keeping his attention focused on me like I was the only woman in the room worth noticing. How do I know this isn't elaborate manipulation? How do I know you're not working with Victoria to finish what Daniel started? Marcus reached into his wallet and pulled out something I didn't expect, a photograph of Harold holding a baby. The baby had Marcus's eyes, Harold's stubborn chin. Because Harold carried this picture for 43 years. Because he told me about the woman he married who made him believe in love again after thinking he'd lost his chance forever. Marcus looked at me with an intensity that made my stomach flutter. Because he said you were the strongest person he'd ever met, and if anything happened to him, you'd be the one to make Victoria pay. The photograph shook in my hands. Harold had carried a picture of the son he never acknowledged, never publicly claimed, but never forgot. Why should I trust you? Because right now, I'm the only person in the world who sees you the way Harold did. Not as a burden to be eliminated or a problem to be solved, but as a woman worth fighting for. The way he said it made heat rise in my cheeks. When was the last time someone called me a woman worth fighting for? When was the last time anyone fought for me at all? What happens if we go to Georgia and this evidence doesn't exist? Marcus leaned back in the booth, studying my face. Then we run. Far and fast, until we find somewhere Victoria can't reach us. We? You think I'm letting Harold's wife face this alone? You think I'm walking away from the only family I have left? His voice carried conviction that wrapped around me like a promise. Helen, I've been searching for family my whole life. I'm not losing you the day I find you. Family. The word felt strange applied to this dangerous stranger who made my pulse race in ways that should feel inappropriate but somehow felt like coming alive again. I need to ask you something, I said, gathering courage I didn't know I still had. And I need you to tell me the truth. Anything. Are you attracted to me? Because I'm feeling things I shouldn't be feeling, and I need to know if this is just me being a lonely old woman or if there's something real happening here. Marcus went very still. The question hung between us like a live wire, dangerous and electric. Helen. He reached across the table and cupped my face in his hand, thumb tracing my cheekbone with a gentleness that made me close my eyes. You're not old. You're not just Harold's widow. You're a beautiful woman who's been told for too long that her value disappeared with her youth. When I opened my eyes, he was looking at me like I was something precious instead of something discarded. This is crazy, I whispered. Everything about tonight is crazy. But crazy doesn't mean wrong. His hand moved to the back of my neck, fingers tangling in hair I'd worn the same way for 20 years because Harold liked it that way. Harold told me you stopped seeing yourself as a woman when his illness started. Said you became just a caregiver, just a nurse, just someone who existed to serve other people's needs. That's what wives do. That's what martyrs do. Wives are partners. Lovers. Women with their own desires and dreams. Marcus's voice dropped lower, more intimate. When was the last time someone touched you because they wanted you, not because they needed something from you? The honest answer was too painful to speak aloud. Years. It had been years since Harold was well enough for real intimacy, and even before his illness, our physical relationship had settled into comfortable routine rather than passion. I can't think about this right now, I said, but I didn't pull away from his touch. Then don't think. Just feel. Marcus moved his thumb to my lower lip, and I felt myself tremble. Feel alive. Feel wanted. Feel worth protecting. The motel room suddenly felt too small and too warm. Every rational thought told me to stop this before it went further. I was grieving, vulnerable, confused about family connections and appropriate boundaries. But rational thoughts had kept me small and safe and invisible for too long. Rational thoughts had made me the kind of woman my own son could abandon on a dark road. Victoria expects me to disappear quietly, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She expects me to be weak and broken and grateful for whatever scraps Daniel throws my way. What do you want to do instead? I looked at Marcus, really looked at him. Saw Harold's determination in his eyes, but also something hungrier, more dangerous. Something that recognized the woman I used to be before I forgot she existed. I want to make her sorry she ever heard the name Helen Morrison. Marcus smiled, and it was nothing like Harold's gentle expressions. This smile had teeth. Then let's go to Georgia. Let's get Harold's evidence. And let's show Victoria what happens when she underestimates a woman who has nothing left to lose. He stood and offered me his hand. Taking it felt like stepping off a cliff, but I was already falling. Had been falling since Daniel's car drove away. At least now I was falling towards something instead of into emptiness. One more thing, Marcus said as I stood. When we get to Georgia, we're posing as a couple. Married. Victoria's people might be watching Billy's garage, and a widow traveling alone stands out. A woman traveling with her new husband after a quick grief romance? That's just small-town scandal, not criminal investigation. Posing? Unless you want it to be real. The suggestion hung between us like a challenge. Like a promise. Like the most dangerous and exciting offer I'd received in decades. Have you ever had to choose between playing it safe and taking the biggest risk of your life? Tell me in the comments what you would do if survival meant pretending to be someone you never thought you could become. Like this video if you think Helen should trust Marcus completely, and subscribe because this fake marriage is about to become more real than either of them expected. What happens when grief turns into rage, and rage turns into something that feels suspiciously like love? Keep watching to find out. We left that motel at dawn, driving south in Marcus's pickup truck with Harold's secrets locked in a metal box between us on the bench seat. The Ohio countryside looked different in daylight, less threatening, more like the landscape Harold and I used to drive through on Sunday afternoons when life was simple and predictable. But simple was dead and buried with my husband. Tell me about Billy, I said as we crossed into Kentucky. Harold's brother. 15 years older than Harold. Runs a garage in Valdosta, never married, drinks too much beer and fixes engines better than anyone in South Georgia. Marcus downshifted for a hill, his hand brushing my knee as he reached for the gearbox. Harold trusted him with the evidence because Billy's the only person Victoria would never think to investigate. The casual contact sent electricity through me again. Wrong timing, wrong circumstances, but my body didn't care about appropriate grief schedules. It had been months since Harold was well enough to touch me with intention, and I was starving for human contact that meant something more than sympathy. How far to Georgia? 8 hours if we don't stop. But we're stopping. Marcus glanced at me with concern. You haven't slept in 24 hours, haven't eaten anything but toast crumbs. We're no good to Harold if we collapse from exhaustion. The way he said, "we're no good to Harold," made something twist in my chest. Like Harold was still with us, still guiding decisions, still protecting me through his son I never knew existed. We stopped for gas in Tennessee, and while Marcus filled the tank, I called Billy's garage from a payphone outside the station. The phone rang 8 times before a gruff voice answered. Billy's garage. Billy? It's Helen. Harold's wife. Silence. Then, Jesus Christ, Helen. Where are you? Tennessee. Driving down to see you. No. Billy's voice went sharp with fear. Don't come here. They've been watching the garage for 3 days. Black sedan with Florida plates, 2 men who asked too many questions about Harold's family. My blood went cold. Victoria's people found you? Victoria found me. Came by yesterday morning, sweet as pie, asking about Harold's final wishes and whether he left anything with me for safekeeping. Billy's voice dropped to a whisper. I told her no, but Helen, these aren't people who take no for an answer. Marcus appeared beside me at the payphone, close enough to hear both sides of the conversation. His face went grim when he heard Billy's words. Where's the evidence now? I asked. Hidden. Safe. But not at the garage anymore. Billy paused. There's something else, Helen. Something Harold made me promise to tell you if Victoria's people came looking. What? Your husband left you more than evidence. He left you instructions for disappearing completely. New identity documents, bank accounts in different names, everything you'd need to vanish and start over somewhere Victoria can't find you. The payphone receiver felt heavy in my hand. Harold had planned for my escape but never told me about it. Protected me even in death by giving me options I didn't know existed. Billy, I'm not running. Helen. I'm not running from the woman who killed my husband and turned my son into a criminal. I'm going to make her pay. Marcus moved closer, his body warm against my back as he leaned over the phone. Billy, it's Marcus. We need a meeting place away from the garage. Who the hell is Marcus? Harold's son. Another long silence. Harold never mentioned a son. Harold never mentioned a lot of things. But I've got his DNA and 43 years of wondering why my mother never got over the man who got away. Marcus's voice carried authority I hadn't heard before. Right now, Helen and I are the only people who can finish what Harold started. Harold's son, Billy repeated, like he was testing how the word sounded. Well, I'll be damned. That explains why he always asked about Tennessee when we talked. Billy, I interrupted, can you meet us somewhere safe? There's a truck stop 20 miles north of Valdosta, right off I-75. Big neon sign says, Peach State Travel Plaza. Meet me there at midnight tonight. But Helen, bring protection. Victoria's not playing games anymore. The line went dead, and I stood holding the receiver while trucks rumbled past on the interstate. Protection. Like a gun? Like Marcus? Like the fierce determination growing in my chest that felt more powerful than fear? We need weapons, Marcus said, reading my thoughts. I've never fired a gun in my life. You've never had people trying to kill you before either. Time to learn new skills. Marcus guided me back to the truck, his hand on the small of my back possessive and reassuring. There's a sporting goods store 50 miles south. We'll get you something you can handle, teach you to use it. The idea of holding a weapon should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like putting on armor. Like becoming someone Victoria wouldn't expect, someone dangerous instead of defenseless. Marcus? I said as we pulled back onto the highway. Yeah? When this is over, when Victoria's in prison and Daniel's safe, what happens between us? He was quiet for several miles, long enough that I started to think he wouldn't answer. Then, that depends on whether you can forgive me for being Harold's secret, and whether I can earn the right to love the woman my father loved. Love. The word hung in the truck cab like a confession, like a promise, like the most dangerous thing either of us could admit. But danger was becoming my new normal, and love was starting to feel like the only thing worth surviving for. Have you ever found unexpected love in the middle of your worst nightmare? Tell me in the comments if you believe Helen and Marcus can build something real from such complicated beginnings. Subscribe now because learning to shoot a gun is just the beginning of Helen's transformation from victim to fighter. The gun range outside Nashville looked like every other strip mall business, sandwiched between a nail salon and a Chinese restaurant, but inside it smelled like gunpowder and possibility. Marcus signed us in as Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan, our fake married name making my stomach flutter each time I heard it. Start with something small, the range instructor said, a woman about my age with calloused hands and no-nonsense eyes. You got good bone structure for shooting. Steady hands. Steady hands. I'd been told that about sewing, about surgery assistance when Harold needed stitches, about the delicate work of caring for someone dying slowly. Now those same hands were learning to hold death instead of preventing it. The weight of the pistol surprised me. Heavier than expected, but balanced in a way that felt natural once I stopped fighting it. Marcus stood behind me, his chest against my back as he adjusted my grip, his breath warm against my ear as he explained sight alignment and trigger control. Breathe out slowly, he murmured, his voice low enough that the instructor couldn't hear. Squeeze gentle, like you're touching something precious. The intimacy of the moment, his body sheltered. The first shot surprised me with its loudness and recoil. The second shot hit closer to center. By the 10th shot, I was grouping hits within the target center ring, and Marcus was looking at me with something that might have been pride mixed with desire. Natural talent, the instructor said, examining my target. You sure you've never done this before? First time, I replied, though that wasn't entirely true. I'd been taking aim at problems my whole life, just never with bullets. We bought ammunition and a shoulder holster that fit under my jacket without showing. Walking out of that gun store, I felt different. Not just armed, but dangerous. Not just protected, but capable of protecting myself. How do you feel? Marcus asked as we got back on the highway. Like someone Victoria's never met before. Good. Because we're about to test whether you can maintain that feeling under pressure. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a text message from Billy. Company arrived early. Black sedan, 2 men, asking direct questions about Harold's package. Need you here tonight, not midnight. Situation deteriorating. The truck cab went silent except for road noise and the sound of my heart beating faster. Victoria was moving her timeline up. Whatever patience she'd been showing was gone. Can we make it by 8? If we don't stop for food or rest, yeah. Marcus looked at me with concern. But Helen, you need to understand what we're walking into. Victoria's people aren't going to ask polite questions and leave when they don't get answers. What are you saying? I'm saying tonight might require you to use that gun you just learned to shoot. I'm saying Billy might already be dead, and we might be driving into a trap. Marcus reached over and took my hand. I'm saying this is your last chance to walk away from this and disappear into Harold's witness protection plan. His fingers intertwined with mine, and I felt the calluses from years of manual labor, the strength in his grip, the steady pulse in his wrist that proved he was real and alive and choosing to face danger for me. If I run now, Victoria wins. Daniel stays under her control. Harold's death goes unpunished. I squeezed Marcus's hand tighter. And I spend the rest of my life knowing I was too scared to fight for the man I loved. And if we go to Georgia? Then Victoria discovers that Harold Morrison raised a woman who doesn't stay down when she gets knocked around. The afternoon sun slanted through the truck windows as we drove deeper into Georgia, and I caught myself studying Marcus's profile when he wasn't looking. Strong jaw, eyes that missed nothing, the kind of competence that came from solving problems with his hands instead of avoiding them with excuses. Marcus? Yeah? When you touch me, do you think about Harold? About how this might feel wrong because of family connections? He was quiet for a moment, considering. When I touch you, I think about how alive you look when someone pays attention to you. I think about how Harold would want someone to see you the way he did. Marcus glanced at me with heat in his eyes. I think about how beautiful you are when you stop apologizing for taking up space in the world. Heat rose in my cheeks and spread lower, warming places that had been cold for too long. This was grief and adrenaline and fear mixing into something that felt like desire, but desire nonetheless. This is crazy, I said again. Getting crazier by the mile. Marcus smiled. But crazy's starting to look good on you. The Georgia state line appeared ahead, marked by a peach-shaped welcome sign that looked cheerful and normal. Nothing like the violence waiting for us in Valdosta. But I was ready for violence now. Ready for whatever Victoria thought she could do to the quiet factory wife who'd never fought back before. Ready to show her exactly how wrong she'd been about Helen Morrison. Do you think learning to protect yourself changes who you are fundamentally? Share in the comments if you've ever discovered strength you didn't know you had. Hit that like button if you're ready to see Helen use those new skills, because what happens in Georgia will test everything she thinks she knows about family, loyalty, and how far a woman will go for justice. Billy's garage sat on the outskirts of Valdosta like a monument to honest work, hand-painted signs, oil stains in the concrete, and the kind of tools that lasted generations instead of breaking after a year. But the black sedan parked across the street told us we were too late for a quiet family reunion. 2 men inside the car, Marcus said, pulling into the garage bay where Billy waved us in with urgent gestures. Professional surveillance. Victoria's not taking chances anymore. Billy looked like Harold might have looked at 70, same stubborn chin, same way of moving like his body hurt but his spirit wouldn't quit. He embraced me with arms that smelled like motor oil and fear. Helen, honey, I'm sorry about Harold. And I'm sorry about what I'm about to tell you. The garage bay felt safer with the door rolled down, blocking us from the street surveillance, but Billy's expression warned me that safety was temporary. Those men came by this morning asking about Harold's final visits, whether he left anything with me, whether you might be coming to collect it. Billy wiped his hands on a shop rag that had seen better decades. I told them no, but they didn't believe me. Where's Harold's evidence? Marcus asked. Hidden where even I can't get to it easily. Harold was paranoid those last few weeks, said if anything happened to him, Victoria would come for his family and anyone who helped them. Billy looked at Marcus with curiosity mixed with suspicion. You really Harold's boy? DNA says so. 43 years of wondering says so. The way Helen makes me want to protect her the same way Harold did says so. Billy's eyebrows shot up. You two are. It's complicated, I said quickly, though complicated didn't begin to cover waking up attracted to my dead husband's son while running from criminals who wanted me dead. Complicated how? Marcus moved closer to me, close enough that I could feel his body heat, smell his cologne mixed with the garage's motor oil scent. Complicated like Helen's the strongest woman I've ever met, and I'm falling for her harder than I should be, faster than makes sense. Jesus, Billy muttered. Harold always said you were something special, Helen, but he never mentioned you could turn grown men stupid in 24 hours. Heat flooded my cheeks. Billy. What? You think I'm blind? Boy's been looking at you like you hung the moon since you walked in here. Billy grinned despite the circumstances. Harold would have been proud. Always said you deserved better than a factory worker with a bad heart. The conversation felt surreal, discussing my love life while criminals watched from across the street and my husband's evidence sat hidden somewhere in this garage. But it also felt real in a way nothing had since Harold's diagnosis. Like I was a woman worth discussing instead of just a problem to be solved. Billy, we need that evidence tonight, Marcus said. Victoria's timeline is accelerating. Can't get it until after dark. It's hidden in the old Methodist church cemetery, buried with my parents. Billy's expression turned grim. Harold figured it was the one place Victoria's city criminals wouldn't think to look, among dead Georgia farmers. Buried? I asked. Waterproof container in my family plot. Been there 3 weeks, ever since Harold called and said he was dying and needed me to hide something that would save your life. The idea of Harold planning his own death, preparing for murder while I worried about his medication schedule and doctor appointments, made my chest tight with grief and rage. There's something else, Billy continued. Harold left you a letter. Personal letter, not part of the evidence. Made me promise to give it to you when you came for the package. He handed me an envelope with my name written in Harold's careful handwriting. Inside, 3 pages of words that made me cry and rage and feel more loved than I had in years. Helen, my darling girl. If you're reading this, then I failed to protect you from Victoria, but Marcus succeeded in keeping you alive long enough to read my final words. Trust him, honey. Trust him with your life and your heart if you can find room for both. I know about the attraction you'll feel for him. I know because I felt the same thing when I met you, like coming home to a place I'd been searching for my whole life. Marcus is good people, Helen. Better than his old man in every way that matters. Don't feel guilty for loving again. Don't feel guilty for wanting to be touched and cherished and seen as the beautiful woman you've always been. I'm gone, sweetheart, but you're still alive, and alive means you deserve happiness. Make Victoria pay for what she did to us. Make her pay for what she's done to Daniel. But after that's finished, make yourself happy in whatever way feels right. All my love, forever and always, Harold. P.S. Marcus doesn't know I approved of his feelings for you. Let him suffer a little before you put him out of his misery. You deserve to be courted properly, even under these circumstances. I laughed through tears at Harold's final joke, at his blessing for something that felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. Marcus read over my shoulder, his body warm against my back, his breath catching when he reached Harold's postscript. He knew? Marcus asked. Harold knew everything that mattered, Billy said. Including how you'd look at his wife like she was the answer to prayers you didn't know you were praying. Marcus turned me around in his arms, right there in Billy's garage with surveillance across the street and death threats closing in around us. Helen, I need you to know something before we walk into that cemetery tonight. What? I'm not falling for you because you're Harold's widow or because danger makes emotions run hot. I'm falling for you because you're brave enough to fight for justice, strong enough to start over at 62, and beautiful enough to make me believe in things I thought I'd given up on. His hands cupped my face, thumbs tracing my cheekbones, and I felt desired in a way that had nothing to do with duty or obligation or taking care of someone else's needs. This is still crazy, I whispered. Yeah, it is. Marcus smiled. But crazy's all we've got right now. Billy cleared his throat loudly. Y'all can figure out your romantic complications after we deal with the killers watching my garage. Right now, we need a plan for getting that evidence without getting ourselves shot. The black sedan was still there when Billy cracked the garage door to check. Two men, professional and patient, waiting for us to make a mistake. But they'd made a mistake too. They'd underestimated a Georgia mechanic, a private investigator, and a widow who'd just learned that being loved was worth fighting for. Have you ever felt ready to risk everything for someone you just met? Tell me in the comments about the moment you knew you'd found something worth fighting for. Like this video if you think Helen should follow her heart, and subscribe because tonight's cemetery mission will test whether love can survive when bullets start flying. Midnight in a Georgia cemetery should have been the stuff of horror movies, but walking between weathered headstones with Marcus beside me and Harold's letter folded against my heart, I felt more alive than I had in years. The November air was warmer here than in Ohio, carrying the scent of pine trees and red clay instead of industrial cold. Billy led us through his family plot with a flashlight covered in red cellophane to avoid attracting attention from the road. Harold's package is buried next to my mama's grave. Figured nobody would disturb a son visiting his mother's resting place. We'd left the surveillance team at Billy's garage by sneaking out through the back fence that connected to an abandoned lot behind the church. Old-fashioned misdirection that worked because Victoria's city criminals expected high-tech solutions, not small-town ingenuity. How deep? Marcus asked, pulling a folding shovel from his backpack. 3 feet down, sealed in a military surplus ammo box. Waterproof, shockproof, and big enough to hold everything Harold collected about Victoria's operation. I knelt beside my mother-in-law's headstone while Marcus dug. Edith Morrison, 1923 to 1987, beloved wife and mother. I'd never met Harold's mother, but I laid my hand on her marker anyway. Help us find justice for your son, I whispered to the stone. The shovel hit metal with a hollow thunk that sounded loud in the cemetery quiet. Marcus lifted out a box that looked military serious, sealed with tape and marked in Harold's handwriting, for Helen's eyes only, open when safe. Not here, Billy said, glancing toward the road where headlights occasionally passed. Take it back to my house. I've got coffee and a kitchen table where you can spread everything out. Billy's house sat behind the garage, a small craftsman bungalow that reminded me of the home Harold and I shared in our early marriage, before we could afford better, when love mattered more than luxury. The kitchen was warm and yellow, with coffee that tasted real and chairs that didn't match but held you like family. Marcus set the ammo box on the table like he was handling explosives. Maybe he was. You ready for this? He asked me. I thought about Daniel abandoning me on that dark road. About Victoria's voice on the recording, discussing my elimination like a business transaction. About Harold dying alone while I shopped for groceries, never knowing his heart medication had been poisoned. Open it. The box contained Harold's entire investigation into Victoria's criminal network. Bank records showing money transfers from 12 different estates. Photographs of Victoria meeting with known criminals. Audio recordings of her discussing murder like menu planning. But the video files were what made my blood run cold. Harold had installed a hidden camera in our medicine cabinet, the one place Victoria would have to access to poison his heart medication. The video showed her entering our house with Daniel's key, moving through our bedroom like she owned it, adding clear drops to Harold's prescription bottle with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done this before. She made Daniel give her a key to our house, I said, my voice hollow with betrayal. Daniel thought he was helping her surprise you with housecleaning service after the funeral, Marcus explained. Victoria told him she was organizing grief support for widows, that accessing the house beforehand would help her prepare appropriate assistance. And he believed her? Desperate people believe what they need to believe. Daniel needed to believe Victoria could solve his problems without destroying his family. Billy poured bourbon into 3 coffee mugs. What Daniel didn't know was that Victoria recorded him giving her that key, recorded him explaining your daily routines, recorded him providing information she'd use to kill both of you. Both of us? Marcus pulled out another folder. Victoria's exit strategy includes eliminating Daniel once the estate transfer is complete. She's done it before. Grateful heir dies in car accident or apparent suicide after inheriting family assets. The photographs showed crime scenes from other states. Young men who'd helped Victoria access their family's money, then died conveniently before they could change their minds or ask inconvenient questions. She never intended to let Daniel live, I realized. Victoria doesn't leave witnesses. Especially not witnesses who know her real name and can identify her to police. I stared at the evidence spread across Billy's kitchen table. Proof of murder, fraud, conspiracy, and a pattern of family destruction that spanned 3 states and 15 years. Harold had gathered enough evidence to put Victoria away forever, if we could get it to someone who'd act on it instead of burying it. Who do we trust with this? FBI, Marcus said. Local cops might be compromised, but Victoria's operation crosses state lines. That makes it federal. What about Daniel? Daniel gets a choice, Billy said grimly. Help us catch Victoria, or go down with her when the FBI closes in. Marcus moved his chair closer to mine, close enough that our knees touched under the table. There's something else in Harold's evidence. Something about your family in Mississippi that connects to Victoria's operation. He handed me a birth certificate I'd never seen before. My father's name, John Crawford, appeared as the father of a child born in Miami, Florida, in 1982. Victoria Castellanos. The room went completely silent as the implications hit me. Victoria is my half-sister? I whispered. Harold discovered it 3 weeks before he died. Your father had other children after leaving Mississippi. Victoria's been targeting you specifically, Helen. This isn't random fraud, it's personal revenge against the family that inherited John Crawford's Mississippi property when he died. My father had abandoned our family when I was 12, leaving my mother to raise 4 children alone. I'd inherited his small farm when he died, sold it to pay for Daniel's college education. Money that was rightfully mine, but apparently Victoria saw it differently. She's been planning this for years, I said, understanding finally clicking into place. Ever since Daniel started college. Ever since she could track where our family money went. Family money she believes should have been hers. The kitchen clock chimed midnight, and Billy stood to check the windows. Surveillance team's gone. Either they got tired of waiting, or they're moving to a more direct approach. Marcus reached for my hand across the table. Helen, this changes everything. Victoria's not just a criminal, she's family. Are you ready to fight your own blood for justice? I looked at Harold's evidence, at proof of my half-sister's murderous greed, at the choice between family loyalty and moral justice. Victoria stopped being family the moment she put poison in Harold's medicine bottle. Have you ever discovered that your worst enemy shares your blood? Tell me in the comments if you believe family connections matter when family commits murder. Subscribe now because confronting Victoria isn't just about justice anymore, it's about settling a family feud that's been building for 20 years. We left Billy's house before dawn, driving Harold's evidence toward what Marcus called the nuclear option, a direct confrontation with Victoria that would either end her operation or get us killed trying. The FBI field office in Atlanta was our destination, but first we had a stop to make that would test whether I was ready to face my murdering half-sister. Victoria's staying at the Hampton Inn on the north side of Valdosta, Marcus said, checking his phone for updates from a contact who'd been tracking her movements. Checked in yesterday under the name Margaret Sullivan, your mother's maiden name. She's mocking us. She's getting sloppy. Criminals who use personal references in their fake identities are criminals who think they're untouchable. Marcus pulled into a McDonald's parking lot where we could watch the hotel entrance from a safe distance. That arrogance is going to be her downfall. Through the restaurant windows, I could see families eating breakfast together, normal families where children didn't abandon parents and siblings didn't murder each other for inheritance money. Part of me envied their ordinary problems. What's the plan? You're going to call Victoria's room and arrange a meeting. Tell her you're ready to discuss Daniel's future and Harold's estate. Marcus handed me a burner phone. Make her think you're broken and desperate and willing to cooperate. What if she doesn't believe me? She'll believe you because it's what she expects. Victoria spent months studying you, Helen. She knows you as the devoted wife who never questioned Harold's decisions, the doting mother who'd do anything for Daniel. She has no idea you've learned to fight back. I dialed the hotel and asked for Margaret Sullivan's room. The phone rang 3 times before Victoria's smooth voice answered. Hello? Victoria? This is Helen Morrison. Harold's wife. Pause. Then, Helen. I was wondering when you'd call. I need to see you. About Daniel. About Harold's estate. Of course you do. Victoria's voice carried satisfaction like honey over poison. Poor thing, you must be so confused about everything that's happening. Death makes financial matters so complicated. The condescension in her tone made my jaw clench. She was talking to me like I was a child, like grief had made me stupid and helpless. Can we meet? Somewhere private? The hotel restaurant at 9 o'clock. I'll be wearing a red scarf. You probably remember me from the funeral. I remembered her, all right. Watching our family like a predator choosing her moment to strike. I'll be there. Helen? Bring any paperwork Harold might have left regarding Daniel's debts. I think we can find solutions that work for everyone. The line went dead, and I sat holding the phone while my heart hammered against Harold's ring. 9 o'clock meant 3 hours to prepare for the most dangerous conversation of my life. How did I sound? I asked Marcus. Like broken prey walking into a trap. Perfect. Marcus started the truck. Now let's get you ready to spring a trap of your own. We spent those 3 hours at a Walmart where Marcus bought me clothes that would help me play the part of desperate widow, black cardigan, sensible shoes, handbag big enough to hide a recording device and Harold's evidence. But he also bought me makeup, perfume, and a dress that actually fit my body instead of hiding it. Why the dress? Because Victoria expects you to look defeated. She expects Harold's death to have broken your spirit and your sense of self-worth. Marcus held up the dress, deep blue, the color Harold always said brought out my eyes. This shows her you're still a woman with pride. Makes her overconfident. In the Walmart bathroom, I applied makeup for the first time since Harold's funeral. Not much, just enough to look like I'd made an effort, like I still cared about my appearance despite everything falling apart. The woman in the mirror looked familiar but different. Still Helen Morrison, but not the Helen who'd been abandoned on an Ohio road. This Helen had steady hands from gun range practice, determined eyes from learning terrible truths, and the kind of composure that came from having nothing left to lose. You ready? Marcus asked when I emerged. As ready as someone can be for breakfast with the woman who murdered her husband. The Hampton Inn restaurant was generic hotel elegant. The kind of place where business travelers ate forgettable meals while discussing forgettable deals. Victoria sat at a corner table where she could watch the entrance, wearing her red scarf like a badge of confidence. She looked younger than I'd expected, prettier, with the kind of polished appearance that came from other people's money. But her eyes were cold when she smiled at me, predator eyes that saw me as prey instead of family. Helen, you poor dear, she said, standing to embrace me like we were old friends. You look exhausted. Her hug felt like being wrapped by a snake, warm and welcoming until you realized it was designed to squeeze the life out of you. It's been a difficult few days, I said, settling into the chair across from her. I can only imagine. Losing Harold so suddenly, then having to navigate all those complicated financial matters. Victoria poured coffee from the pot on the table. Daniel tells me you're having trouble understanding the estate planning decisions. I'm having trouble understanding why my son thinks Harold's assets should be managed by someone we just met. Victoria's smile never wavered, but something shifted behind her eyes. I'm not just someone you met, Helen. I'm family. Family? Your half-sister. John Crawford's daughter. Victoria stirred cream into her coffee with deliberate calm. I've been watching our family for years, waiting for the right moment to reconnect. By killing my husband? By helping your family access resources that should have been shared decades ago. Victoria leaned forward, and I could see the resemblance now, something around the eyes, the shape of our hands. Our father left Mississippi with money that went to your family instead of being divided fairly among all his children. Our father abandoned his family. That money paid for survival, not luxury. That money paid for your comfortable life while his other children struggled. Victoria's voice hardened. Daniel understands the debt your family owes. He's willing to make things right. By letting you kill me? Victoria laughed, a sound like glass breaking. Kill you? Helen, you're more valuable. The conversation was being recorded by the device Marcus had hidden in my purse, but hearing Victoria admit her plan so casually still made my blood freeze. But frozen wasn't the same as defeated. And Victoria was about to learn the difference. Have you ever sat across from evil wearing a familiar face? Share in the comments if you've discovered that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. Hit that subscribe button because Victoria's about to find out what happens when you threaten the wrong woman's family. The flight to Atlanta felt like stepping into another world. Marcus held my hand during takeoff, and I wondered when I'd stopped feeling guilty about enjoying his touch. 3 weeks ago, I was a grieving widow. Now I was a woman hunting down criminals with a man who made my heart race in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Nervous? Marcus asked, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. Terrified, I admitted. But not of flying. The rental car GPS led us through Georgia's rolling hills toward Macon, where Victoria's financial records showed she'd grown up. Marcus had tracked down her childhood address, and what we found there made my blood run cold. The house stood empty, paint peeling, but the mailbox still read Thompson. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, watched us from her porch with suspicious eyes. You looking for Victoria Thompson? She called out. My heart stopped. Thompson. Not Victoria Banks. Not Victoria anything else. Yes ma'am, Marcus replied, his investigator instincts taking over. We're trying to locate her. Mrs. Rodriguez shook her head. That girl's been trouble since she was 16. Ran off to Ohio after the incident. What incident? I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. The fire. Burned down the Methodist church where she worked. Never proved she did it, but the insurance money disappeared same time she did. Marcus and I exchanged glances. This wasn't Victoria's first crime. She was a professional. Back at our hotel that night, Marcus spread the evidence across the bed. His laptop glowed in the dim light as he pulled up more records. I sat beside him, close enough to feel the heat from his body, close enough to smell his cologne. Helen, he said softly, there's something else. The screen showed a death certificate. Robert Thompson, age 67. Victoria's father. Cause of death, heart failure. Look at the date, Marcus whispered. 6 months before she met Harold. 6 months before she started her pattern. She killed her own father, I breathed. Marcus turned to face me, his eyes dark with concern and something else. This woman is dangerous, Helen. More dangerous than we thought. The weight of it hit me. I wasn't just hunting a con artist. I was tracking a killer. And she had my son wrapped around her finger. We have to warn Daniel, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew it was hopeless. He wouldn't listen. Not to me. Marcus reached out, cupping my face in his hands. We'll stop her. Together. His lips found mine then, and this time I didn't hesitate. This time I melted into him, letting myself feel alive again. His hands roamed my back, and I pressed against him, desperate for connection, for hope, for anything that reminded me I was more than just an abandoned mother. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, I saw something in his eyes that scared and thrilled me. "Helen," he whispered, "I'm falling for you." I should have pulled away. Should have remembered I was too old for this, too broken, too complicated. Instead, I kissed him again, harder this time. "Then fall," I whispered against his lips. But even as we lost ourselves in each other, one question burned in my mind: how many others had Victoria killed? And would Daniel be next? What would you do if you discovered the person manipulating your child was a killer? Drop your thoughts below. Your story might help someone else. 3 days later, my phone rang at 2 a.m. Marcus stirred beside me in the hotel bed, his arm tightening around my waist protectively. We'd fallen into an easy rhythm, investigating by day, exploring each other by night. For the first time since Harold's death, I felt like a whole person again. "Mom?" Daniel's voice was shaky, scared. I sat up, pulling the sheet around me. "Daniel? What's wrong?" "Something's happened. Victoria, she's in the hospital." My blood turned to ice. "What happened?" "She collapsed at dinner. The doctors say it's her heart, but Mom, she keeps asking for you." I looked at Marcus, who was already reaching for his clothes. "For me? Why would she?" "She says she has something to tell you. Something about Dad." The line between hunter and hunted was about to flip. 4 hours later, we stood outside Victoria's hospital room in Cleveland. She looked smaller in that bed, vulnerable, but I wasn't fooled. I'd learned too much about what she was capable of. "Helen," she whispered when she saw me. "Come closer." Marcus stayed by the door, protective, ready. I approached the bed cautiously. "I know what you've been doing," Victoria said, her voice barely audible. "Following me. Digging into my past. Then you know what I found." A weak smile crossed her lips. "My father deserved what he got. Just like Harold did." The confession hit me like a physical blow. "You killed my husband. Harold was going to change his will. Cut Daniel out completely. I couldn't let that happen." Her eyes were cold despite her frail appearance. "Daniel needed that money. We needed that money." "We?" "I'm pregnant, Helen." The room started spinning. Daniel had never mentioned. "You're lying. 3 months along. Your grandchild." Victoria's hand moved to her stomach. "And if anything happens to me, if you keep pursuing this, that baby dies too." The manipulation was masterful. Even lying in a hospital bed, possibly dying, she was still playing games. "Daniel doesn't know about the baby yet," she continued. "But he will. And he'll choose his child's mother over his own mother. Just like he chose me over you on that road. You made him abandon me. I suggested it. He chose it." Victoria's voice grew stronger. "Face it, Helen. Your son picked money and a young woman over duty to an old one. That's not my doing, that's his character." Marcus stepped forward then. "Time's up." But Victoria's eyes locked on mine. "There's a USB drive hidden in Daniel's apartment. Behind the picture of you and Harold in his bedroom. Everything's on there, the insurance fraud, the bank transfers, the real cause of Harold's death. Take it, and you'll have your proof." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm dying, Helen. Real heart failure this time, not poison. And I want to watch you choose between justice and your family." She was right. If I exposed her, Daniel would lose everything: his inheritance, his freedom, possibly his child. If I stayed silent, she'd get away with murder. "The USB drive," Victoria whispered. "It also has recordings." Daniel knew, Helen. About Harold's death. He knew, and he chose the money anyway. The machine beside her bed started beeping faster. Nurses rushed in. "Choose," Victoria mouthed as they worked on her. Marcus pulled me away, but her words followed us down the hall. Daniel knew. My son knew she'd killed his father, and he'd still chosen her side. In the parking garage, I broke down completely. Marcus held me as I sobbed against his chest, mourning not just Harold's death but the death of the son I thought I knew. What do I do? I cried. How do I choose between justice for Harold and destroying Daniel? Maybe, Marcus said gently, the choice isn't yours to make anymore. He was right. Daniel had already chosen. Now I had to choose too. That night, lying in Marcus's arms again, I made my decision. Tomorrow, we were going to Daniel's apartment. Tomorrow, I was going to get that USB drive. And then the world would know what my son really was. But first, I was going to make love to the man who'd shown me I could still fight, still feel, still choose myself. As Marcus's hands found me in the darkness, as his lips traced paths down my neck that made me forget my age and remember only my desire, I realized something. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about choosing the life I deserved instead of the one people expected me to accept. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Tell me in the comments how you'd handle Victoria's ultimatum. Daniel's apartment smelled like stale beer and regret. He was at the hospital with Victoria, giving us the perfect chance to search. Marcus kept watch while I headed straight for Daniel's bedroom. The picture sat on his nightstand. Harold and me at our 25th anniversary, both of us laughing at something I couldn't remember anymore. My hands shook as I moved it aside. There, taped to the back, was a small USB drive. Got it, I called to Marcus. But as I turned to leave, Daniel's laptop caught my eye. Still open, still logged in. Bank statements filled the screen. $50,000 deposited 2 days after Harold's funeral. $25,000 more a week later. Payment after payment, all from accounts I'd never seen before. Helen. Marcus's voice was urgent. Car pulling up. I grabbed the USB and Harold's picture, but my eyes stayed on that screen. One more scroll, and I saw it, a message thread between Daniel and Victoria. Mom's getting suspicious. Maybe we should tell her about the baby. Asterisk. Not yet. Let her suffer a little longer. She deserves it for being such a burden. Asterisk. I feel bad about the road thing. Asterisk. You did what was necessary. Weak parents make weak children. Your father understood that when he changed his will. Asterisk. Victoria, did you really? Asterisk. Harold made his choice. We made ours. The money is ours now. Asterisk. My son. My baby boy. Talking about his father's murder like it was a business transaction. Helen. Marcus's voice cracked with urgency. I pocketed the USB and ran, but those messages were burned into my brain. Daniel hadn't just known about Harold's murder, he'd been grateful for it. We made it to Marcus's car just as Daniel's truck turned the corner. My heart hammered as we drove away, the evidence weighing heavy in my pocket. At the hotel, Marcus plugged in the USB while I poured myself a whiskey with shaking hands. The files opened like a road map to hell. Bank records. Insurance policies. And then, the recordings. Victoria's voice filled the room. The digitalis in his heart medication won't be detectable for long. Make sure you're with him when it happens, Daniel. Comfort him. Play the grieving son. Then Daniel's voice. What if he changes his mind about the will? He won't have time. Trust me. I had to stop the recording. Had to run to the bathroom and throw up everything in my stomach. My son had watched his father die, knowing it was murder. Marcus found me on the bathroom floor 20 minutes later. He didn't say anything, just held me while I cried for the family I'd lost twice, once to death, once to betrayal. What now? I finally asked. Now we decide who gets to hear this first. The police, or Daniel. I thought about confronting my son, making him listen to his own voice planning his father's murder. I thought about the baby Victoria claimed to carry, innocent in all this. I thought about Harold, dying alone while his son counted money. Neither, I said finally. Marcus looked confused. First, I want to know if she's really pregnant. If that baby exists. I stood up, steadying myself against the sink. Because if Victoria lied about that too, then she's got no cards left to play. And if the baby is real? I met his eyes in the mirror. Then I choose Harold. I choose justice. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive, even for family. Marcus kissed my shoulder, a gentle promise that whatever I decided, he'd stand with me. There's something else on the drive, he said quietly. Video files. I didn't want to know, but I had to. We returned to the laptop, and Marcus opened a video dated 3 months ago. Victoria and Daniel in what looked like a hotel room. She was undressing, he was counting cash. But what chilled me wasn't the intimacy, it was the conversation. After your mother's gone, we'll have complete control, Victoria was saying as she pulled Daniel toward the bed. The house, the savings, everything. She won't just disappear, Daniel replied, his hands already reaching for her. People disappear all the time in Georgia. Especially old women who don't know their place. They'd planned to kill me too. Marcus slammed the laptop shut, but the damage was done. My son wasn't just a willing participant in his father's murder, he'd been planning mine. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably sitting by Victoria's bedside, playing the devoted boyfriend. Maybe even feeling genuine worry for her health. But I knew the truth now. They were both monsters. Call the police, I said without turning around. Helen. Call them. Tonight. No more waiting, no more hoping Daniel has some explanation. I faced Marcus, feeling something hard and final settle in my chest. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. As Marcus dialed 911, I held Harold's picture tight. I'm sorry I didn't protect you, I whispered to his smiling face. But I won't let them get away with it. The investigation was about to become a manhunt. And I was ready to watch my son fall. Do you think some betrayals are unforgivable? Share your thoughts below. Family loyalty has limits, and we've reached mine. The police station felt like a morgue. Detective Sarah Martinez listened to our recordings with a stone face, occasionally making notes. When the audio of Daniel planning Harold's murder played, her jaw tightened. Mrs. Peterson, you understand this implicates your son in premeditated murder? I understand my son helped kill his father for money. The words tasted like poison. And was planning to kill me next. Detective Martinez nodded grimly. We'll need you to wear a wire. Get him to confess on record. 3 hours later, I sat in Daniel's living room wearing recording equipment hidden under my cardigan. Marcus waited outside in an unmarked police car. My son paced like a caged animal, his eyes red from crying. Mom, I'm so glad you came. Victoria's, she's not going to make it. I forced sympathy into my voice. I'm sorry, honey. She was pregnant, Mom. 3 months. We were going to tell you after. He stopped himself. After what, Daniel? He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the moment he realized I knew. His face changed, hardened into something I didn't recognize. How long have you known? He asked quietly. Long enough. I kept my voice steady. Long enough to find the USB drive behind your father's picture. Daniel's whole body went rigid. Mom. Long enough to hear you planning my death in Georgia. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. My son, my baby, the boy I'd nursed through fevers and cheered at baseball games, stared at me with calculating eyes. You don't understand, he finally said. Dad was going to cut me out. Leave everything to some charity because he thought I was irresponsible with money. 27 years old, and he still treated me like a child. So you killed him. Victoria killed him. I just didn't stop her. The distinction seemed important to him. I wanted to scream. And me? What was your excuse for planning my murder? Daniel sat down heavily, his head in his hands. You wouldn't have understood. About the baby, about Victoria, about any of it. You would have made everything complicated. Complicated? My voice rose despite myself. I would have made murder complicated? You don't get it. Daniel exploded, jumping to his feet. You lived your whole life playing by rules that don't exist anymore. Dad hoarded money while I struggled with student loans. You both acted like poverty was noble while sitting on a nest egg that could have changed everything. So you killed him for it. I took what should have been mine anyway. The recording device captured every word. Detective Martinez and her team would hear the confession, the justification, the complete absence of remorse. But what hurt most was the way Daniel looked at me, like I was an obstacle, not his mother. Victoria's not really pregnant, is she? I asked quietly. Daniel's face crumpled. No. That was just to buy time. Time for what? To figure out how to deal with you. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 62 years. Well, you don't have to worry about dealing with me anymore. What do you mean? I mean I'm done being your mother. I'm done pretending you're the son I raised instead of the stranger you became. Daniel stepped toward me, and for a moment, I saw panic in his eyes. Mom, you can't. I can't what? Turn you in? Report you for conspiracy to commit murder? I moved toward the door. Watch me. They'll never convict us. It's just recordings. No physical evidence. I turned back to him one last time. Maybe. But Harold's body is being exhumed tomorrow. Victoria kept some of that digitalis, didn't she? For emergencies? The color drained from Daniel's face. And that church fire in Georgia? The insurance fraud? All those elderly men who died suspiciously after meeting young women who looked just like Victoria? I smiled, and it felt like ice. You picked the wrong accomplice, son. She's a serial killer, and you're her latest fall guy. I walked out then, leaving Daniel standing in his living room, finally understanding that his mother wasn't the weak woman he could discard on a country road. Outside, Marcus was waiting. The police moved in as soon as they saw me emerge. How do you feel? Marcus asked as we watched Daniel being led away in handcuffs. Empty, I said honestly. But free. Daniel looked back at me through the police car window. His mouth moved, forming the word Mom, but I turned away. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. That night, Marcus held me while I grieved, not for Harold this time, but for the son I'd loved who had never really existed. What happens now? I asked. Now you live, Marcus whispered into my hair. For you, not for anyone else. He was right. For the first time in my life, I was going to choose myself. But Victoria's words from the hospital echoed in my mind. I want to watch you choose between justice and your family. She'd gotten her wish. I'd chosen justice. Now I had to live with the consequences. Have you ever had to choose between loyalty and what's right? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes the hardest choices make us strongest. 6 months later, I sat in the front row of a Cleveland courtroom, watching my son face a jury of his peers. Marcus squeezed my hand as the prosecutor played our recordings for the 3rd time that week. Daniel looked older, thinner, broken in ways that almost made me feel sorry for him. Almost. Victoria had died in the hospital 2 days after our confrontation. Heart failure, the doctor said. Real this time. Part of me wondered if she'd somehow poisoned herself, one last manipulation to avoid facing justice. But the evidence lived on without her. The USB drive had revealed a network of frauds spanning 3 states and involving 7 elderly victims. Harold wasn't her first kill. He wasn't even her 5th. Mrs. Peterson, the prosecutor called. Please tell the jury about the night your son abandoned you. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in that courtroom. Daniel wouldn't look at me. My son drove me to an empty road and told me to get out, I said, my voice steady. He left me there in the dark, 3 miles from town, because his girlfriend convinced him I was a burden. And what did you discover about your husband's death? That my son watched his father die, knowing it was murder. That he helped cover it up. That he profited from it. The defense attorney objected, but the damage was done. The jury had heard enough. During recess, Daniel finally approached me. The bailiff stayed close, but Daniel's hands were cuffed anyway. Mom, he said quietly. I never wanted Dad to die. It just happened. No, Daniel. You chose to let it happen. There's a difference. I was scared. Victoria said if I didn't go along with it, she'd frame me for everything. So you threw your father under the bus to save yourself. Then you planned to do the same to me. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I never meant for any of this. Yes, you did. I cut him off. You meant every bit of it. The only thing you didn't mean was getting caught. I walked away from him then, back to Marcus, back to the life I was building without the weight of pretending my son was someone he wasn't. The verdict came 3 days later. Guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit murder. Insurance fraud. Elder abuse. 25 years to life. As they led Daniel away, he looked back at me one last time. I love you, Mom. I didn't respond. Love without respect, without basic human decency, wasn't love at all. It was just words. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Mrs. Peterson, how does it feel to testify against your own son? It feels like justice, I said simply. Marcus and I drove back to our hotel in silence. We'd been living together for 3 months now, and it still felt strange, good strange, but strange. A woman my age, starting over completely. Any regrets? He asked as we packed our bags. About Daniel? No. About Harold? Every day. I folded my clothes carefully. But not about us. Never about us. Where do you want to go? We'd talked about this. With Harold's insurance money finally released to me and Marcus's security business thriving, we had options. Real options. Somewhere warm, I said. Somewhere we can start fresh. Florida. Texas. Austin, maybe. I smiled at him. I want to learn to dance. Real dancing, not the church social kind. Marcus laughed, and the sound filled all the empty spaces Victoria and Daniel had carved out of my heart. That evening, we made love with an intensity that surprised us both. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. Now, in Marcus's arms, I felt like it was just beginning. I'm proud of you, he whispered afterward. What you did took courage. It took survival instinct. There's a difference. Is there? I considered that. Maybe courage and survival were the same thing. Maybe choosing yourself when everyone expects you to sacrifice yourself was the bravest thing a woman could do. As we fell asleep tangled together, I thought about Harold. He would have wanted justice. He would have wanted me to choose truth over comfortable lies. But more than that, he would have wanted me to live. Really live, not just exist. Victoria was wrong about one thing: grief doesn't make you weak. It makes you clear about what matters. And what mattered now was the future I was building with a man who saw me as a partner, not a burden. Tomorrow, Marcus and I would drive toward our new life in Texas. Tonight, I was just grateful to be alive, aware, and free from the weight of loving people who only saw me as useful. Some chapters end in heartbreak. This one ended in liberation. What's the bravest choice you've ever made for yourself? Share below. Sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. 1 year later, I stood in our Austin kitchen, coffee brewing while Marcus read emails at the table. Sunlight streamed through windows that looked out on a garden I'd planted myself, tomatoes, herbs, flowers I'd never had time for before. "Letter from Ohio," Marcus said, holding up an envelope. I recognized the handwriting immediately. "Daniel. Want me to throw it away?" Marcus asked gently. "No. I'll read it." The letter was short. Daniel had been transferred to a medium-security facility. He was taking college courses, supposedly finding religion, claiming he'd changed. The words felt hollow, rehearsed. But one line stopped me cold. "Mom, I understand now why you had to choose justice. I'm proud of you for being strong enough to do what I couldn't. Too little, too late, but still." "Any response?" Marcus asked when I finished. "No. Maybe someday, but not today." Marcus nodded and pulled me onto his lap. At 63, I still felt like a teenager when he touched me. We'd married 6 months ago in a small ceremony at Austin's Botanical Gardens, just us, the officiant, and a photographer Marcus insisted we needed. "So what's the plan today?" he asked, his hands settling on my hips. "Dancing lesson at 2. Dinner with the Hendersons at 6. Our neighbors had become close friends, a retired couple who treated our age gap romance like the most natural thing in the world. And between now and 2. I pretended to consider this, though his hands were already making their intentions clear. "I suppose we could find something to do." He lifted me onto the kitchen counter, and I wrapped my legs around his waist, marveling at how natural this felt. How right. 6 months of marriage, and we still couldn't keep our hands off each other. The grief counselor I'd seen after the trial said it was normal. That after trauma, the body craves connection, pleasure, life affirmation. I didn't care about the psychology. I just cared about the way Marcus looked at me like I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "I love you, Helen Peterson Rodriguez," he murmured against my neck. "I love you too." Later, as we lay in our bedroom with afternoon light painting patterns on the walls, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. Invisible. Discarded. Convinced my life was winding down. That woman never could have imagined this, tangled in sheets with a man who worshipped her body, living in a house she'd chosen, planning a future that belonged entirely to her. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked, tracing lazy circles on my shoulder. "About leaving Ohio?" "Never." "About Daniel?" I paused, considering. "I regret the son I thought I had. But I don't regret discovering who he really was." "And Harold?" "I miss him every day. But I think he would have wanted this for me. This life, this happiness." Marcus kissed my forehead. "He would have." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Peterson, this is Detective Martinez. Thought you'd want to know, we've linked Victoria to 11 more deaths across the Southeast. Your testimony helped us solve cold cases going back 15 years. Thank you for your courage. 11 more families who'd gotten justice because I'd chosen truth over comfort. Worth it?" Marcus asked, reading over my shoulder. "Every single day." That evening, at our dancing lesson, I watched myself in the studio mirrors and barely recognized the woman looking back. Confident. Radiant. Alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. "You're a natural," our instructor said as Marcus spun me through a complex turn. "Just good partnership," I replied, catching Marcus's eye. He winked, and I felt heat rush through me that had nothing to do with the dancing. On the drive home, Marcus reached over and took my hand. "I have something to tell you." My stomach clenched. Good news or bad, I was ready. The security company's expanding. Phoenix, San Antonio, maybe even overseas. He squeezed my fingers. "Want to see the world with me?" I thought about it, packing up again, starting over somewhere new, building another life from scratch. A year ago, the idea would have terrified me. Now it thrilled me. Will there be dancing in Phoenix? I'll make sure of it. Then yes. Always yes. That night, we made love with the windows open, Texas wind cooling our heated skin. Marcus's hands mapped every inch of my body like he was memorizing me, and I responded with an eagerness that still surprised me. Afterward, as we lay catching our breath, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From abandoned wife to murder investigator to passionate lover to business partner to world traveler. Marcus? Thank you. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for being brave enough to let me. I drifted off to sleep thinking about tomorrow's possibilities, about countries I'd never seen and adventures I'd never imagined. About a future that belonged entirely to me. Somewhere in Ohio, Daniel was learning what betrayal felt like from the inside. Somewhere in a Georgia cemetery, Victoria was facing her own judgment. But here in Austin, in Marcus's arms, I was learning what it meant to live without apology. The quiet woman who'd been dismissed on a country road was gone forever. In her place was someone I liked much better, someone willing to fight for truth, to choose herself, to love without fear. My story had started with abandonment. It was ending with freedom. And every morning when I woke up next to Marcus, when I felt his hands find me in the half-light of dawn, when I remembered that I'd chosen this life instead of accepting the one others tried to force on me, I knew I'd made the right choice. Some people think family loyalty means accepting any behavior, forgiving any betrayal. But real love, the kind worth having, requires respect, honesty, and basic human decency. I'd learned to tell the difference. And I'd learned that sometimes walking away is the most loving thing you can do, for them, and for yourself. The woman who'd been left on that road had found her way home. Just not to the home everyone expected. If you've stayed with my story this long, thank you. If you've ever felt invisible or discarded, remember this: your story isn't over until you say it is. Your power is still there, waiting for you to claim it. Drop a comment below telling me about a time you chose yourself over others' expectations. Like and subscribe if this story meant something to you, and remember, it's never too late to start over. Sometimes the best chapters of your life begin after everyone else thinks your story is finished.